So there's this town where the water is contaminated, and now 1 in every 20 kids has a decreased IQ, and people are washing their babies with baby wipes, and macaroni and cheese is this luxury because of the amount of bottled water that it uses. And people are brushing their teeth in capfuls of water and taking baths in buckets. And when you turn on the faucets, brown, toxic, smelly water comes out. And this may sound like a post-apocalyptic nightmare, but it's the reality for people living in Flint, Michigan. And this is a water emergency that occurred because of bureaucratic arrogance, and because the people of Flint are innocent and in distress, they deserve immediate aid, and if that immediate aid means that it's federal, then so be it. So this whole problem started in 2011 when the town of Flint was in a $27 million deficit and they needed to cut costs and figure out how to fix it. So one of the things they decided to do is to get water. Instead of buying it from Detroit, they're going to use the local Flint River. So immediately there's contamination problems. First it's contaminated with E. coli, then it's contaminated with coliform bacteria, then they find TTHMs, which are these carcinogens that cause permanent liver and kidney damage, and these like contamination results draw the attention of University of Michigan, and U of M comes in and tests a few buildings and they find that there's elevated lead levels. So again, independent research is also intrigued by these results, and they come in and they find that the water of the Flint River is especially high in chloride, which makes it really corrosive. And so that these pipes in certain people's houses are made of lead. So this corrosive water is pouring through these pipes and it's leaching lead and iron into the water, and also other contaminants that make it brown and smelly and full of neurotoxins. So the EPA and residents start contacting the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, kind of telling them the concerns. People are getting rashes, we find there's elevated lead in the water, and MDEC is incredibly dismissive, tragically dismissive. They say things like, oh, our data doesn't confirm this, and, well, that's only a few houses that you tested. And it's not until a local pediatrician begins does the study where she finds that the amount of lead in children's blood has doubled or even tripled in some areas of Flint, that the percent of kids that have elevated lead levels. And so this causes a lot of publicity, and all of a sudden the story starts gaining traction. At this point, it's been almost a year since people have been dealing with brown water coming out of their faucets. And finally, after all this time, the water is declared unsafe, and MDEC starts kind of acknowledging that the water's unsafe, and Barack Obama and the governor of Michigan finally get a state of emergency declared in Flint, excuse me. So now there's this huge problem, and people are starting to turn towards the solutions. And the newly elected mayor, Karen Weaver, talks about that if you want to fix this problem and you got to get rid of the lead pipes, and that's going to cost $55 million. But if you had a team of 32 men working full-time, this problem could be fixed in a year. And because this is not really, I don't view it as Flint's problem, I kind of view it as MDEC's problem, was sort of a problem of state refusal to take people's concerns seriously. There is a $220 million plan in Congress right now that would use federal surplus funds in order to fund not only the recovery from this emergency, but any kind of man-made emergency that involves contaminated water. So that would solve all of the retrofitting of the pipes and any other infrastructure needs that Flint would have. But there are people that are in opposition to this plan. They say that if you flood the pipes with phosphates, in 6 months, eventually, the pipes might have their corrosion covered up to the extent where you can use them again. And there's also the Senator Mike Lee from Utah that was talking about, well, Flint has already received enough government, federal support, they don't need any more. and and Michigan has this state surplus, and they should use that. But the thing is, it's important for states to have surplus budgets. Their budgets are much smaller than federal budgets, so they might need that money a lot more. And I think at this point, like was it 9 people might have potentially died from Legionnaire's disease because of this problem. So I think their desire to have new pipes is sort of justified, and that this emergency warrants federal aid. And there's one person that this federal aid could have helped a long time ago, and her name is Leanne Walters, and she has 4 kids. She has an 18-year-old, a 14-year-old, and 2 3-year-old twins. And right away, when Flint started making the switch to this new water source, all of their hair started falling out. Their eyelashes started falling out. She had to take her 14-year-old to the hospital for abdominal pain. And, but the worst thing that happened was to her 2 twins. So after there was a lead advisory for the water, she took all her kids to get their blood tested, and she found that one of her kids, all of her kids had elevated lead levels in their blood, but one of her kids had full-blown lead poisoning. And, it's been about 8 months, and her one twin weighs 53 pounds, but the one with lead poisoning weighs 35. It's an 18-pound difference. And he's fatigued, he's tired all the time, he can't pronounce words that he used to be able to pronounce correctly. And the thing about lead poisoning is that it's an irreversible neurotoxin. So the least that the people of Flint deserve, after having been poisoned, dismissed, and thoroughly and profoundly disrespected, is immediate federal aid, so that whoever can recover from this emergency can do so as fast as possible.